So there is a commandment God gave us that first of all, we are all called and there is an obligation, only one obligation that has 3 equal dimensions. Love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength. Number 2, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Do not do to your neighbor, do not say to your neighbor, do not think about your neighbor that which would have been hurtful if it was being thought about you, said about you, or done to you. So when my friend, the moderator, says what must change, we have to change all our teachings, our 3 offices. We have 3 offices in Christianity. One is the priestly office, where we help people to worship. He was talking about it's not worship alone. Yes, it's not worship alone, but that's the first office. The second office is pastoral office, where we wound we bandage the wounded. We comfort the agitated. And then we have number 3, the prophetic office, where we agitate the comfortable. You know, we raise, we resuscitate, we tickle, like what we are doing today. So what must change is, number 1, we need a public theological ethics, a public practical spirituality, a public prophetic voice, witness, and mission. Those of you who are good at math, we use it to do intersections. So there is a section where if you are Christian, you have an area where the public is not welcome. So Christian, Muslim, what? But then there is where these intersections are meeting, and we call that the public what? The public space. So there should be a public conversation on what type of theological ethics can fulfill this function of loving God and loving your neighbor as you love yourself beyond your tradition. Like in my tradition, there is something I don't like, excluding some people from Holy Communion. You know, yet Jesus said, do this in memory of me. But Chigumi Day, I have kept, because that's my religion. We must learn to differentiate between difference and dangerous and danger, so that we appreciate that not different does not mean dangerous. Number 3 and last, we need to have a common future. So far we have different visions of the future, but probably as Ugandans, as East Africans, as Africans, and as global humans, we need a unity of future where, for example, in IRC we have a common vision which says a divinely peaceful, united, and prosperous Uganda. And then we work backwards to do the theologies from each angle. Thank you very much.
Now that he has already touched on differentiating different from dangerous, looking at the common future, and I know the age group that you belong really is saying in the time to come, it's going to be like this. And he has talked about love. Now, what specific practices and behaviors should define faith community?
I begin from something different and I come to that. I know and I'm aware and convicted that conversations of inclusion, dignity, and rights, you must always begin by situating yourself in that conversation. You are speaking as who and from what perspective? Because if we don't do that, sometimes we assume a lot of things. And so for me, in this conversation of dignity, inclusion, belonging, rights, I speak as a human, I speak as a priest and an activist. So those are the 3 things. I am a human and I identify that my humanness is connected to someone's humanness. And demeaning their humanness means demeaning my own humanness. I'm a priest, and being a priest in this space is political. On one end, a religious leader is the emblem or the picture of opposition and all bad things. But on that other hand, a religious leader comes to the space as a healer and a supporter. But an activist, because then that's where I want to begin from. Activist or activism is something that people don't want to talk about in religious spaces. It is something left for people called human rights activists or defenders. But I want to today talk about what does activism look like in a religious space. The second thing I'd want to say just to Bill, and I'm so privileged to have Canon Gideon in this conversation with me. So religion in general is defined by two things according to me. Number one is what I want to call a software, what Canon Gideon talks about theology. What we believe, what we are convicted about is the software of all religions. So every religion, ATR, Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, the particular fundamental beliefs that they have. I want to think that is the software. But that belief as a software influences actions, influences behavior, influences what we can see as the hardware. So like Canon have said, we need to, what would define a faith community that talks about inclusion, belonging, and love and everything begins from the software, begins from what we believe, begins from what we have inherited as the tradition, as the belief of our faith traditions. Then that would influence the right action. For example, as a Christian, and talking from a Christian perspective, one of the beliefs that we have is the belief in creation, that God is the creator of all human beings in their diversity, and Christians would say in God's image and likeness. What does that mean in practice? If I admit that he might be different, but he's a bearer of God's image. The software that's the theology, is God's image. So how do I put that in practice? Would invite me to appreciate, to accept, and to admit that I did not have any influence to make them who they are or how they are created, and they are still part of God's creation. So that invites us to not just tolerating people as a practice. Don't tolerate, accept people because you share in their humanity that is given by God. Number two, the best practice, or something as an action from our belief that leads to acceptance, is to appreciate that people's identities and experiences are real, and they are not things to spiritualize. They're not things just to minimize. For example, I know Christians would say when they go to an open air crusade that they've come to look for souls. For heaven's sake, I am more than a soul. I am a soul. I am a human being. I have real experiences. I don't have food on my table. I don't have education. So it's to refuse to reduce people to a soul, reduce people to particular things that I want to harvest, and look at them as human beings who have real experiences and real things. And finally, we need to begin conversations of what does acceptance look like. And I finish with that. Acceptance, for me, is not defined by the person giving the acceptance, is the person looking for the acceptance. This is what I mean. If you want to accept me in your terms, you are still holding the power over me. But if you want to accept me from a point of dialogue and discussion, understand my experience, understand who I am, acceptance becomes something that I came to seek, but from my lived experience, and not your position of power and privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, when exclusion persists and it goes on, responsibility lies with all of us. And why do I say all of us? Responsibility lies to all of us simply because we are social animals. Human beings are social animals. And being Africans, we apply so much the principle of collectivity. That's why It is us in this generation that have changed things a bit, but traditional Africa, your issue was my issue. Your children were my children. Because when community succeeds, it succeeds as a whole. When community fails, it fails as a whole. I'll give an example in Uganda here, where some of us, in one or the other, have made it, yet majority of our people in Uganda cannot even afford 1 meal a day. But I want to assure you this morning, when I was parking my car down there, I locked with the remote, then I went and opened the doors to make sure that the car is locked. At home, I have a perimeter wall around my house, dogs, but I cannot sleep before checking the doors. Why? Because I would say, well, me, I have made it, at least I can afford a meal. Therefore, all the other people, it's not my concern. But I do that because I know that the principle of collective payment, if some members of our communities are excluded and cannot make ends meet. Therefore, when exclusion of any kind persists, responsibility is to all of us. Since all of us pay when some people are not given services, when some people are not included, when some people are excluded. I cannot say that my things do not concern you, because if I don't make it, by all means, you'll pay in one or the other. You get? Just like in a family, when one of your family members refuses to go to school and at the end of the day they cannot support their family, what happens to the other members? Other members who are successful have a role to look after us. Even if you don't look after us, your children will need relatives, and those relatives shall be our children. You get? So that is the principle of collectivity. Responsibility is to all of us, since collectivity dictates that if I am well, you are well. If I am not well, you are well. Even when you dodge and say for you doesn't concern you, you're deceiving, because by all means you pay. So where does responsibility rise? One, the principle of community collectivity. As a community, all of us pay. Number two, when we use the public health lens and look at exclusion, the public health expenditure that comes as a result of exclusion, who pays? All of us pay tax. You get? Money goes to the consolidated fund. Then money is dispersed into and dispatched into different departments. It's our money. So when exclusion happens, who pays? Me and you. Number two, the vicious cycle of disease in the communities where we stay. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, well, today I want to get HIV. Nobody. But through the vicious cycle of HIV will go around, and by all means, even if it does not get me, it will get a relative. Even if it does not get a relative, it will get a Ugandan. And who is supposed to pay? You get? So the public health view pushes us to make sure that we actually do inclusion at all levels. You get? In Uganda here, so many people say, well, if we are talking about the issues of teenage pregnancies, somebody will say, well, delivery in Mulago Kawempe is free. Delivery in a health center 4 is free. The question is there free health care? No, somebody is paying. Who is paying? Me, because I pay tax, and you. So if you do exclusion, by all means, through the public health expenditure, you will pay. That's where responsibility goes. Then let's look at mental health. You know that currently we have a mental health crisis in Uganda. Okay, 2 more minutes. We have a mental health crisis in Uganda. Depression, psychosis, people are stressed, people have psychological disorders, psychopathologies, and all these things. The question is, if, due to exclusion, if one of our members of the community goes through mental health issues, who pays? You get? It's all of us. So when the community is well, all of us are well. When the community is not well, all of us are not well. Then maybe lastly, service delivery. If exclusion continues, money will go, the public health budget will go to a given department. That means that other social services may not get as enough funds as they would be required. For instance, we spend a lot of, we lose a lot of money in due to mental health issues, due to HIV, due to other issues, STIs and so on. The money that we lose is in trillions. That money would have been used probably to construct roads, schools and whatever. So that means that as a Wananchi Ugandan who does exclusion, I am driving on a road with potholes, shock absorbers are getting spoiled, and I'm being in the garage all the time. You get? Because probably the money that would have been used, if we did inclusion and treated everybody with dignity, the money that would have been used to work on those, we are losing it in disease, in legal battles, in people being down and people being dysfunctional. So where does responsibility lie? With all of us? Who pays the cost? Us. Who loses the future? Us. Who loses the comfort? It is us. Who loses the basics of life? It is us. And at the end of the day, all of us shall perish like fools.
We are looking at faith and inclusion in the communities. Thank you for bringing the mental, for bringing the public health angle. However, remember, when we are talking about exclusion persisting, there are issues to do with the interpretation of theology. There are issues to do with the leadership decisions.
Specifically, I would want to hear from Kenya. What are some of the practices that the church is doing to ensure that, or some of those visible practices you've seen in the Kenyan church, or even Muslim community, how they are handling belonging and inclusion, and how exactly, because I believe they're a little bit better. So what are some of those practices you're going to tell us that we could borrow as Uganda to do better in terms of belonging? Thank you.
So some of the practices that I see, number one is interfaith dialogue spaces where Muslims, Christians, African traditional religious people sit to have discussions about what we share in common. We share our humanity. The call for love is standard for all religions. The call for community. So interfaith dialogue and conversations that are premised not on supremacy but partnership. The thing that we are the majority here, that doesn't add anymore. It's to what do we share and how do we support community. Specifically in the Christian community, there is what is called contextual Bible conversations, or what has been called ISJA, intersectional see, judge and act, which means reading scripture from a lived perspective, a lived reality. Beginning with the scripture is first written before it says what it says. Written by who, written to whom, written at what time, and how do we apply that in our context. That has supported, for example, reading texts that have been used for exclusion, excluding women from leadership, excluding queer folk from participating in religious spaces, making SRHR conversations taboo. They have been unpacked in those kind of spaces. Finally, where I serve and minister in Nairobi, creation of safe spaces where people can experience faith. I serve in a community called the Cosmopolitan Affirming Community, where our ABBA also sits, is a purely LGBTIQ plus community, gathering every Sunday afternoon to express their faith in very affirming ways in Kenya. So if there is need for that in Uganda, safe space programs would be very important. Pema Kenya does safe space, not in religious spaces, but creating Fridays where Muslims can gather and pray within the office space, for example. creating Sundays where Christians can do their festivals, Easter, Christmas, in ways that are affirming. So safe space is a thing also that I want to point out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the really strong insights. From what I've been able to gather, looking at the conversations around public theological approaches and the theological ethics, in my perspective, when we touch the public or the community, there is the element of transformational change, to change of mindset and perspective in that is at an individual level, and how that then translates into outcomes is through the society or community actions. So the question here is, how can we be able to go a step further than that to be able to target law reform or institutional change and reforms, and more specifically considering that there is a very rampant trajectory of laws being enacted that are very discriminatory and targeting the marginalized communities, but not only that, also the civic space, organizations, their spaces to advocate with autonomy is really reducing. So how can we then use the power or the role of theology? What strategies can we do that to really influence institutional change reforms and law reforms?
From the question given to Reverend Gideon, that what can be changed, he talked something about the religious side of view on his side, yeah? But according to Islam, I believe nothing should be changed. Because when you look in the Quran and the Hadith, it talks about inclusion. In every chapter, I'm just giving you some chapters and verses, you can go and look in them. When he talked about killing and helping somebody in Surah Ma'idah, that's the chapter 5, verse 32, he said, when you heal or when you treat one soul, you have treated the whole universe. You kill the whole universe. They didn't say about that a lesbian or is a human being. If you kill one human being, you have killed the entire universe. That's inclusion. When you look in Surah Nisa, chapter 5, chapter 4, verse 135, be justice. Even if it comes to kill your parents, just be justice. Don't about anybody's segregation or type or what. Just be just whenever you're doing anything in life. So when somebody comes in the mosque, is for instance is a gay, if it is you, how would you be handled? That's a verse. So when you look in the Quran, it was trying level-based to emphasize inclusion in all chapters. I will give you more than 20 chapters and verses to go and check. So nothing should be changed in the Quran. Just to follow it as it is, we will handle inclusion as it is.
Thank you.
So first of all, I want to appreciate the team. I think there are a lot of insights and discussions that can be picked up from there. But for Prof, I think there's one thing that you mentioned about differentiating being different and dangerous. And I think that really has made sense to me in very many wide ways. And if we start to unpack that, I think we could find a way of just acknowledging that human beings are human beings, and then we differentiate when it's dangerous or it's being different. Thank you so much.
In wrapping up, I want to say 3 quick things. One, in response to what Vincent was asking, theology is not what people do in a university. Theology is what people do daily. Their belief in God and how that belief influences what they say. How they read the Holy Quran and interpret it, that is theology. So first of all is to disconnect theology from an elitist space that only those with the language can do it. Everybody is doing theology. And so when we talk about laws, for example, religious fundamentalism has found its way in the way laws are made in East Africa because people don't acknowledge that even a president, even a member of parliament, Even somebody cooking in the kitchen is doing theology. So it's to invite us to a space where everybody's voice can matter in the way they talk about theology. The second thing I want to say is inviting us to a place where no subject is a taboo subject, where we can openly talk about things. Because if we don't talk about it, it affects real human beings. So unless we come to a place where no subject is taboo, in the family, in the house, in churches, in our mosques, then we begin to create a space where lots of conversation can happen that can support us come to transformative action that you talked about. Finally, I invite people like myself to learn from secular spaces. And I begin with a question. Today, if you went to a hospital and you are sick, do you care whether the doctor is a Muslim or a Christian? You simply sit there to be treated. Do you care whether he slept with a man or a woman? You don't even care. You simply sit there and you're treated. I invite religious people to give the same standard. That when I'm meeting a human being, whether he's giving a service or I'm giving a service, like in hospital, like in the legal profession, like education, I don't care who they are. I want to give them a service, I want to treat them well and allow them to thrive. Thank you.
My conclusion would be applying so much the principle of collectivity, viewing whatever that we are discussing using the public health lenses, the public finance lenses, and all these, but also localization and contextualization of discussions. As a local person, if I don't see these conversations at my level, as I don't see these conversations at the level that affects my day-to-day livelihood and interaction, then I may not understand what you're talking about. So I know most of us are English speakers in here, but the question would be, how do we now localize and contextualize this conversation? I want to see a time where the local person, and by the local person I do not mean us, the local person. This is Kampala, but we have places here where, for instance, in Katanga here, where we have a guy who has been drunk now for 30 days. So to me, as a public health practitioner, my attitude is, until that guy can explain to me some of these things, then I've not yet done work. So I want to see us contextualizing, localizing, and communitalizing all these discussions, so that the local person can see himself or herself in the conversation. I am also a champion of localization, contextualization, but I'm also a champion of ethnography. Ethnography, and I talk about this in all forums where I go. Can we apply ethnography in all the work that we do, such that all these complex topics on inclusion, exclusion, public health, commerce, whatever, all these things can be seen in our day-to-day attributes and interactions as the local people. When we see that, we support you. Then maybe lastly, we also have to harmonize the way we deal with the religious leaders themselves. At least the message is changing, because sometimes back it was about, those ones are opposition, but those ones are ignorant, they don't know what's going on. But now, how can you say that I am ignorant, yet I have 4 or 5 degrees on me, and I have a perspective that is valid? So the issue of all of us working as partners, you get, as collaborators, as people that are pushing towards the general goal of achieving general wellness of everybody, if we did that, then it would do. Then also utilizing our seniors in theology to do what we call theo-scientific integration. You get? When we integrate science into theology, when we integrate science in theology into biomedicine, when we integrate theology into biostatistics, and when we integrate theology into biopandemitism, then we shall all achieve. Thank you.
The problem is that we are called, obliged, and welcome to belong to the family of God. where all of us are in joy, in communion and fellowship with the divine. What is the challenge? The challenge is that there are some people of faith, leaders of faith, institutions of faith that do theology, ethics, and spirituality in a way that blocks that belonging. And some are excluded, especially minorities. Two types of minorities: minorities in power and minorities in numbers. And people, because they don't understand them, they look strange or they appear strange, people react with fear and sometimes with violence. What is the solution? Triple love. Being reminded right now, every time, that we need to love God and love our neighbors, even if they appear strange, even if they appear different. We need to love them as we love ourselves. This badge you see here has 6 types of people who are blocking our belonging to the full. One is the family. Second is friends. The third is self, our personal selves. Fourth are the communities where we worship or educate or work. Number 5 is the government, our government. So we need to, because the answer was, where is the responsibility? All of that are spheres of responsibility where love is demanded. Finally, how do I take that message to the local person? I put it in music. What can increase our belonging? Nothing but a triple love, faith response. Multiplying, yes, and save. Ending, seeding with high mass levels. Oh, precious is that truth that treats, prevents, and hopes in God. Nothing else that we know, nothing but a triple love, faith response. God bless you.